Good morning, and welcome to our day together, walking through the great matter, a day together on the path. And we could think about this day as reminding us that we're always walking through the great matter. We're always on the path, whether we're in Marks and Spencer's with people or walking in the countryside. Whoever we're with at that point, we're walking the great matter together. Even if we don't state it, we can be aware that it's what's happening. We're here together in a place at this time. I've had over 26,000 days of walking the great matter. And this practice helps me remember that each moment I'm walking the great matter with you and with everyone, because it's so easy to forget. The French writer Colette said, "I've had such a wonderful life. I just realised, I just wish I'd realised it sooner." I just wish I'd realised it sooner. And that is also the flavour of the day, is to remember we have this precious life. And we're going to be together, meeting this precious birth that we all once had, this precious time we're spending together, and this precious death that we're blessed to have. Suzuki Roshi, one of the teachers in our lineage, said, "To feel your being here, in this moment, is a very important practice. To feel or to be yourself at a certain time, in a certain place, that is why we practice our way. That is why we practice our way." So today is a real opportunity for us to feel our being here in this world, in this time between our precious birth and our precious death. I've been aware so much during this hot weather of the beauty of gardens. Our little garden at home, Catherine's beautiful garden, and also everything in between. When I was coming along on the train on Thursday, the vegetation at the side of the railway track was just so abundant and so much offering itself to the world, to the creatures, to the insects. There's a verse from Bokanon. He says, "Life is a garden, not a road. Life is a garden, not a road. We enter and exit through the same gate. Wondering where we go matters less than what we notice. Where we go matters less than what we notice." And I would say, where we go matters less than that we notice, that we pay attention to each moment, each opportunity to be present with ourselves and other people in this world. So we're going to go to a kind of garden today, a cemetery. Catherine and I walked through it yesterday, so I already have resonances of that. The beauty, the lushness, and the presence of that place. And we're going to go in through a gate, and enter through a gate T.S. Eliot said, round the corner, through the first gate into our first world. We're going to enter that space, and in the time that we're in there, about an hour, we're going to complete a circuit and come out the other end. Like our lives. It's like a little microcosm of our existence. In the other room today, there's a National Childbirth Trust event. And I don't know whether you saw the little dolls on the seats. And about 40 years ago, those of you who know my partner Trudy, she was a National Childbirth Trust teacher. And that really was the inspiration for everything that happened after that being drawn to the great matter. And we used to have it in our house. We used to have expectant mothers and sometimes fathers with them as well, accompanying them. And they would come to the lessons. Maybe there were 10. I'm not sure. And then one day, when the babies had been born, they have a reunion. And I was working at home that day. It was a day like this, a very still summer's day. And the parents were out in the garden having a cup of tea, and I came down to find something in a drawer, a document. So I opened a drawer, and there was a baby beside the desk. And then I went to get some tea, and there was a baby in that corner. There were 8 babies in this one room with me. Just there, just arrived. And it was very touching to hear them talking in the garden, and just to feel the quiet, but the energy of these babies. So we're going to describe an arc today through the great matter that we're all here. We're all in it. And when I saw this NCT meeting, I thought about, we don't often give meditation instructions or sitting instructions, but maybe we give something to move into the stillness of sitting. And I brought this poem by David White, and I wasn't sure if I was going to use it, but I'm going to use it as just one verse relating to this for our way into our half an hour's sitting. And I'll read it twice, so we kind of get it, we feel it. He says, "Breathe then, as if breathing for the first time, as if remembering with what difficulty you came into this world, what strength it took to make that first impossible in-breath into a cry to be heard by the world. Breathe then, as if breathing for the first time, as if remembering with what difficulty you came into the world, what strength it took to make that first impossible in-breath into a cry to be heard by the world." So we're going to now sit for half an hour, and we're going to share our breath, our breathing and our presence with each other until we move towards the assembly for walking to the cemetery, and we'll end the sitting with the robe chant. So I look forward to our precious day together. Thank you. Welcome back from our walk and our shared lunch together. Our dear Sangha friend Claudine, who is Swiss-French, sometimes signs off her emails with the word friendly. Friendly. I like that. And it struck me because it's so different from best wishes, or something we might habitually say at the end of a message. And it strikes me that today we have embodied friendliness during the lunch and during the walk and during the sitting. It's such an important aspect of our practice. And kindness, because we are together walking through the great matter, so it invites friendliness and kindness and responsiveness. So thank you, Claudine, for offering something different at the end of an email. So we've all come back from our walk in the cemetery, and I'm sure you've brought images in your mind of what you've seen and what you've read. And Karen Mazan Miller writes about paradise. We have an idea of paradise in this society. But she says the word paradise originally meant an enclosed area. An enclosed area. And inside the word are its Persian roots. Peri, meaning around, and diz, to create a wall. And she said, looking at it straight on, I could plainly see paradise is a backyard, or a garden, or a cemetery. Not just my backyard, but everyone's backyard, teeming with weeds, leaves, half-dead trees, moles, mosquitoes, mud, dust, skunks, and raccoons. Like the entire world we live in, bounded only by how far we can see. So I'm really drawn to the experience of paradise as our garden, our world, our messy miracle of a world that we inhabit together and individually. I was really struck by some of the inscriptions on the graves, and I don't know why, but at the time as well as talking about something else on the graves, I was reminded that Spike Milligan's grave is in Chichester in Sussex, and the inscription is, I told you I was ill. I told you I was ill. And he was only allowed to have it if he wrote it in Gaelic. So it's in Gaelic because the church wouldn't allow it to be in English. So let's go to the beginning, or what we think of as the beginning, which is happening 2 rooms away from us, where there are a lot of expectant mothers and some fathers too. The very beginning, and babies in the embryo. I was listening to a piece by the wonderful composer Oliver Arnolds recently, and at the beginning of one of his songs, he has a woman who offers this fragment about life in the embryo. She says, as we get bigger and bigger, the distance between ourselves and that other outside world becomes smaller and smaller. And this world that we are inside, which seems so huge in the beginning and so infinitely welcoming, has become very uncomfortable. And we are obliged to be born. And my father says, birth is so chaotic and violent that he's sure that at the moment of birth, we're all thinking, this is it. This is death. This is the end of my life. And then we're born, and it's a surprise, because it's just the beginning. And I find that very beautiful and personally very poignant, because my mother had a stillbirth, and for the rest of her life she was attending to that deep wound. So it isn't always the beginning. Sometimes this is death. So the preciousness of actually arriving here in this human body is very precious. When we look at the graves that we've seen today, there are so many children who live for a very, very short time. There's a wonderful writer called Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she writes about many wonderful things. But in one of her stories, she tells the truths through beautiful stories. In the one I'm going to mention, she talks about the midwife of life and death. That when we're born, in this story, we have a midwife who brings us into this world. And that midwife in this story follows us throughout our life. She's always there, but if we turn, we can't see her. Mine's out there somewhere. But that the feeling that she offers is that it's taken care of. This is taken care of. There's a midwife watching you all the time. Suzuki Roshi, who I mentioned this morning, said, I discovered that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to believe in nothing. That is, we have to believe in something which has no form and no colour, something which exists before all forms and colours appear. If you were always prepared for accepting everything we see as something appearing from nothing, knowing that there is some reason why a phenomenal existence of such and such a form and colour appears, and at that moment, you will have perfect composure. Perfect composure. In the autumn of 2020, my twin grandsons, Jesse and Kit, were born. And in the spring of 2021, my great-grandson, Billy, was born. And I turned very much towards this statement by Suzuki Roshi. They had apparently appeared from nothing. And when I held them in my arms, I actually said, where have you come from? To each one of them. Before they're almost too into this world to know where they've come from. And it was a very poignant question. Where have you come from? The Zen writer Carolyn Atkinson in her book, A Light in the Mind, talks about her first grandson. And she says, I've been wondering what it is to experience this living between birth and death as embodied beings. And I began to wonder what I could say to my wonderful new grandson as he too experiences this embodied life. I asked myself, what do I wish my grandma had told me? I wonder if you do that sometimes. What do you wish your carers had told you? And she says, it occurred to me that one of the most foundational teachings of the Buddha, called the 3 marks of existence, is exactly what I'd like to share with him. I'm thinking of an everyday teaching, something that even a child can understand. And she explained very often she forgets what the 3 marks of existence are. And she forgets to feel them as an embodied experience. And very often in this practice, sometimes I want just someone to remind me, what are we doing? What is this? So, she's saying, these are the core facts of life the Buddha taught. There is one thing to know, one thing to learn, and one thing to do. A simple thing for a child, and for us, and for me. So, one thing to know. First mark of existence. Life can be wonderful, and life can also be painful. Being in these bodies that are born and grow and age and die includes all the different feelings we have. To be in a body is both pain and pleasure. It is sorrow and joy. It is loss and gain. This is what we can know. This is what we can say to ourselves. We can say to others. We can say to a child. It's one thing to learn. It is what we're experiencing, whatever we're experiencing. Life keeps changing all the time. When life feels unbearable, something shifts. And when it all seems perfect, something shifts also. As long as we are embodied, nothing will last forever. Not pain, not pleasure, not sorrow, not joy, not ignorance, not wisdom. So this is the thing to learn. Everything keeps changing as long as we are in these bodies. The third one, to do. The third core teaching of the Buddha is usually explained in this way. We are all interconnected, or we are not solid, separate selves. But a friend of mine's a slightly different explanation that I like very much. Don't take it personally. Let's not take all the painful knocks of life personally. And I would suggest that if we are flaming successes, it's good not to take that personally either. So that's the thing to do. One thing to know, one thing to learn, one thing to do. And high-level practice for the third one is don't take it personally, even if it's meant. I've just added that because I once heard it during a Hakomi training and it's been quite helpful. There's a character in The Simpsons called Mr. Burns. Those of you who know The Simpsons will know that he's a very socially uncomfortable middle-aged man, businessman. And I once watched an episode where Mr. Burns was left with a young child. And of course he had no idea what to do. So he's looking at this child and this child's looking at him and he goes, "So, You're a child. How's that going for you? And beyond actually thinking of it as an evaluative question for us, so how's that going for you? It kind of opens up something for me in that question about each stage of our life and how we experience all the things I've talked about in the 3 marks of existence. I live near a primary school, and every few hours the children come out to play. And I've been there 35 years. It's always the same sound, always. And sometimes, if the wind is in a particular direction, it comes down the chimney. So it's distilled child music. It's the music of their lives. Always the same. And I think when I was 6, 7, I would have been part of that music. And then we live in an area where there are quite a lot of students. And there was a party the other night. Always the same sound of kind of excitement and loudness and clearly relational efforts are going on. Always the same sound. And Catherine and I were in a cafe yesterday, and 3 young women, they must have been about 20, came in, and they bought some food and sat down, and it was so archetypally 3 young women, 5, 6 young women of 20, making that sound that young women make when they're being social together. And of course, as we go through our lives, we have that same thing that happens wherever we are, at whatever particular age we're at. I want to describe what I would call a Roger Ebert moment. So, several years ago, I was decorating on the top of a ladder, and I was listening to the news, The World at One. And it was announced that the film critic Roger Ebert had died. And so I continued painting. And then I began to hear a little bit about his life and about how people loved him so much and how courageous he was. And I stopped painting and I started listening. And I expect this happens to you. Sometimes something comes in and you think, it's so beautiful, so arresting that you want to find out more. And he died of cancer after a long illness. So I found this by him, which he wrote just before he died. So I'm just going to read a couple of pieces from it. I know it is coming, and I do not fear it, because I believe there is nothing on the other side of death to fear. I hope to be spared as much pain as possible on the approach path. I was perfectly content before I was born, and I think of death as the same state. I was perfectly content before I was born, and I think of death as the same state. I respect kindness, friendliness in human beings first of all, and kindness to animals. I don't respect the law. I have a total irreverence for anything connected with society, except that which makes the roads safer, the beer stronger, the food cheaper, and the old men and old women warmer in winter and happier in the summer. And then he quoted this piece by Vincent van Gogh, who wrote this shortly before he died. He said, just as we take a train to Tarascon or Rouen, we take death to reach a star. We cannot get to a star while we are alive any more than we can take the train when we are dead. So it seems to me possible that cholera, tuberculosis and cancer are the celestial means of locomotion, just as steamboats, buses and railways are the terrestrial means. To die quietly of old age would be to go there on foot. That is a lovely thing to read and a relief to find. I will probably take the celestial locomotive, or as his little dog Milou says whenever Tintin proposes a journey, not on foot, I hope. I've been meeting our dear Sangha friend Kath Wilmers, who has a cancer diagnosis, and she lives in Somerset, so we meet each week on Zoom. And she sits looking down her garden, and 10:30 is her best time of day, and so we meet, and I can feel the garden as my camera apprehends her. She's looking down the garden, and she said, until now I've never really appreciated the flowers, never really seen them, but this has been a real opportunity to just notice my garden or my paradise. So, back to Suzuki Roshi. Suzuki Roshi went to Yosemite National Park, and he saw some huge waterfalls. He said the highest one is 1,340 feet high. He said it's like a curtain from the top of the mountain, and the water flows not swiftly as you might expect, but slowly because of the distance. And not one stream, but it's separated into many tiny, tiny streams. And he says, I thought it must be a very difficult experience for each drop of water to come down from the top of such a high mountain. It takes time, a long time for the water to reach the bottom of the waterfall. And it seems to me our human life may be like this. We have many difficult experiences in our life, but at the same time I thought the water was not originally separated, but was one whole river. Only when separated does it have some difficulty in falling. After we are separated by birth from this oneness, as the water falling from the waterfall is separated by the wind and rocks, then we have feeling. You have difficulty because you have feeling. You attach to the feeling you have without knowing just how this kind of feeling is created. When you do not realize that you are one with the river or one with the universe, you have fear. Whether it is separated into drops or not, water is water. Our life and death are the same thing. When we realize this fact, we have no fear of death anymore, and we have no actual difficulty in life. So, the last piece of In Blackwater Woods says, to live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go. To let it go. And then to come full circle, we have a piece by Royakam. My legacy, what will it be? Flowers in spring, the cuckoo in summer, and the crimson maples of autumn. The practice that we have is to support us to appreciate our lives in the widest possible way, and to appreciate the very, very smallest thing, to support us to have this big mind that can see everything that is moving within life, but also to know that most of the time we see it through small mind, through our small mind lens. But just sometimes, when we're practicing, something opens up, the space opens up, and we have an opportunity to see something much bigger. And our practice seems to go between these two, this feeling of small personal self to something much more possible, and to not cling to either one, but to practice together so that we notice that we're walking the great matter together, and we're always on the path together at all times. So we come back again and again and again to keep reminding ourselves of this fact. And then we go away and we forget, and then we come back again. So I wish your practice this flow and this support of everyone here in our Sangha to be able to do this together. So, thank you.